to us. So thanks for your commitment to that. Questions?
Yeah, Cheryl, with the 8th pick, it's always kind of a, it's always kind of a, not necessarily a crapshoot, but you're not necessarily sure that you're going to get somebody who can help you right away. Even looking at your roster, it looks like anybody you take at A is going to have a difficult time making the team. So how do you approach what to do with that pick, either using or moving it in terms of what you hope to accomplish for this team?
Yeah, whether it's 8, 13, we have 22, 28. We think we're at the point in the league where it's challenging for any of these prospects to not only make a team, but then carve out space on said team. So, our approach is that, we're going into a draft and we want to select the best players available that we think that will have a shot to make the team. And then obviously you get to training camp and, they've got to show that they can do that. And it is a big time challenge in the WNBA that you go from, the Final Four one weekend and 2 weeks later you're in a training camp. So the proximity of our draft and then our training camp and then the training camp of just 3 weeks, those are all things that make it really difficult for these players that aspire to be in the WNBA. Well, from our standpoint, we'll look for talent, we'll look for need, and we'll put a training camp together that might be one of the most competitive in the league this year.
Going off of that, when you have the opportunity to have such a competitive camp, how exciting is it for you as a coach to kind of think about the positions that you could be in? Have so many young players in the building battling the likes of Sylvia Fowles, Autry, Kayla McBride.
Yeah, I think when people are drafted to Minnesota, they understand there's a certain culture, there's a championship mindset. So I think that's very exciting for them. And then they have the reality of when you, like you said, when you come to training camp and there's Sylvia Fowles and Angel McCautry and Ariel Powers and, Lasia Clarendon, who's been in the league for a long, long time. There's big time challenges. But we are a team that aspires to win a championship this season. And so that goes with certain things. And that would be when you come to training camp, who you're facing.
Continuing on that, it's got to be tough for any rookie to come in knowing that, this is a team with a very clear goal of wanting to send Sylvia Fowles out with a championship. Both as a GM and as a coach, how do you kind of look to maybe relieve some of the pressure that might be on, whether it's a player you draft or a player like Renee hasn't had WNBA action to come in and be able to contribute, whether it's practice or in a game setting?
Yeah, I don't look to relieve anybody's pressure. I think we look to try to position them as best we can to find success and get a chance to show who they are, what they're about in that period of time. And you get a couple of preseason games in there. So you'll get good opportunity. You'll get a good coaching staff that I think will, certainly help each day. Those players will watch a lot of film. So we try to accelerate the process as much as you can. And you see who can take the information, retain it, use it, that sort of thing. But, my job is to evaluate. My job isn't to relieve anybody's pressure. It's their job to come in and show if they're a WNBA player or not.
In the past, when you were winning titles and you were drafting 12th or 11th or 12th, you would often either draft and trade or trade the pick. There have been times when you have used the draft pick on a player who might not be ready to come to the league right away, but might be ready down the road, like a Damaris.
Right.
But I don't think you've ever, in the time I've been covering you, used assets to move up.
Yeah.
Is that against your kind of philosophy? Is that something? Is that a possibility? Is there somebody that you see out there that might be worth using some assets to try to get?
Yeah, I think this two-part deal. One, it's always appealing for any of us that are at the lower half of the draft. It's always appealing to move up. It's not always easy to move up because, as you know, it takes two, or more than two if you wanted to go that route. But you have to have somebody that's willing to share that asset with you. And we haven't necessarily found the right combination of assets to get it done. There have been deals that have been done that, we very much would have been a part of, but just didn't have enough for that team to make a deal with us. So, I think moving up, there all kinds of conversations have occurred. Speaking to specific drafts, I don't think I can't go through each draft in terms of my memory to know which players, but I remember in the Feast of Collier's draft desperately trying to move up. So, it's like I said, sometimes we just can't get it done. Some of the assets maybe that were available weren't interesting. This year's draft, there have been conversations like everybody has had. So I don't mean to sit here and then somebody's going to go tweet that Minnesota's trying to move up. That's not the case at all. The conversations are always, you're inquiring about what's possible. So every team has done that. That's not exclusive to Minnesota. And as we saw with Atlanta, they were able to pull something off. And they'll be continuing conversations all the way through the trade deadline on Sunday. And then, we have the ability to, like you said, draft and trade. So everything is on the table.
All right, we'll move to questions on the Zoom. We'll start with Jace and then go to Eric. Jace, go ahead.
Cheryl, is it getting harder to move back or out of the first round with kind of so many teams, I guess, ending up in these roster crunches?
Is it getting harder? No, I think, you're weighing whether that's worth doing, I think. But no, I don't, like I said, I think if you have, somebody has similar goals, and is to be a trade partner, then, you can get something done. I don't think there's any reluctance to do that per se. It has nothing, I don't think any bearing necessarily on anything to do with the roster.
And then just what are your overall thoughts of this class, particularly maybe in like the top 10 players? What do you see as strengths and how this class is kind of shaping up?
Yeah, it's a good class. Always the top of the draft is a little more appealing. But I think it's a good class that has good players that I think, we always say at minimum, it will have a chance to be serviceable players in the league. So I think it's more of that type of class as opposed to generational players. But there's certainly value in serviceable reserve players. So I think if that's the minimum, if that's the floor, then that's a pretty decent class. I think where is it going to land in terms of the history of the draft? Obviously, we don't know that just yet.
All right, we'll go to Eric and then Jackie. Eric, go ahead.
Coach, as always, I appreciate your time. I wanted to ask you, so when you are evaluating talent and you look at this draft class, do you sometimes maybe lean towards those athletes that are from the Northeast, like such as a Delaware or a Maryland, just because you've played at LaSalle, you went there, do you kind of maybe gear towards those type of players when looking at your talent?
Not at all. Not even a little bit. I am partial. I'm really excited when I've got somebody from the Northeast that I think that can really hoop. But no, there's not I think we all have biases in the in the evaluation process and selection process, but that's not one of my biases.
All right, we'll go Jackie and then Darren. Jackie, go ahead.
Hey, Cheryl, good to see you.
Hi, Jackie.
Thanks for being here. So I'm curious as to what you know about some of the top international prospects. I know some names that have floated around are Cone and Jade Melbourne. So I'm curious how you assess those two compared to some of the international folks that we've seen come out in recent years.
Yeah, I think, Sika Kone probably has gotten the most attention, I think, of the international prospects. I think a lot of us will be at some point during the draft, find some value in maybe a young player. They're only 19, would be maybe a junior in college right now, that you kind of go, if they're willing to, forego a year or two, like Kent mentioned, like we did with Dantas, there's some value in that. I can't say that I know the international prospects in great depth. But I think, the couple that you mentioned are certainly names that have been talked about for a while, and where they fall, where they compare, that's really difficult. Because our knowledge is much greater for the college group. I've had a chance to see, a couple of them internationally through my USA basketball experiences, but where they end up or what type of prospects they are, that's hard to know.
And just a point of clarification, if you can, you mentioned a trade deadline on Sunday. I just didn't know there's an official trade deadline in the league.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just didn't know.
Yeah, that's cool. We can still, obviously we'll still see trades. It's just that it's after they're exercised.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank
the
you.
draft picks are exercised, I should say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll go to Darren and then Lucas. Darren, go ahead.
Cheryl, good morning. Thanks for doing this. Where are
Absolutely.
you at cap space wise, just in terms of being able to sign one or multiple draft picks?
Yeah, we have options that we're considering. It all depends on obviously where how things fall and who the prospect is, how they do. We're probably going to be having discussions about our salary cap all the way up until the roster deadline, May 4th or whatever that ends up being. That it depends. We're going to be very open-minded. We're going to be very, very open-minded as far as how the prospects do. We're going to let the competition sort of solve that for us. And I know what the books say, and I think what her hoop stats has out there that everybody has access to. And but you have options.
And then one more. What is your biggest need? I mean, would it be another post player?
I guess that's the hard part for us is that need wise, I don't think that we have any one position that we say we really have to have or really have to cover this in this year's draft. Particularly with the 8th pick. What we'll do at 8 and 13 is kind of sort of see how the draft goes, and we'll probably have some balance to those picks. I think 13 could be as good as 8 in terms of the level of prospect. And we'll try to cover some ground positionally with those 2 picks. And yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty solid from our roster standpoint, and we'll kind of see what direction the next few weeks brings, and kind of go from there. But we're not going to be pigeonholed in terms of position when we select it. If you see us select something at 8, you might be different at 13, or vice versa. And in 22, 28, we'll probably be more looking at that point training camp needs from a roster standpoint, balance.
All right, and we'll move to final questions from Lucas. Lucas, go ahead.
Hey, Cheryl. So going back to, you mentioned kind of having biases in the evaluation process. Looking back at when you became a GM, it seems like your team has kind of valued players that have had success at the college level, kind of more, if you want to say, pedigree or performance over maybe potential. Is that something that's intentional, or is that just kind of how the drafts have fallen every year?
I think that's more a product of how the drafts have fallen. Again, when we look at the things that we value, that's not, it tends to happen. I think it may appear to be a bias from all of us, but that it sort of tends to happen. But I'd say for us, if we picked 3 things that we valued, it's not among the 3.
And then when it comes to this year, obviously with the push for a championship and whatnot, does that influence kind of how you're approaching the draft, as far as, like you said, selecting player at 8 might be different than what you select at 13? Is this more of a draft for this year versus a draft for the future? Or how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, that is a little tougher. We probably are making decisions based on there's the draft itself, and then you get into training camp, and now you're formulating a roster. I'm hoping that our decisions on draft day will reflect a player that we think could help us to our mission of this season. I think we're in a little of a short-term view right now with our team. I think that's been indicated in our signings and free agency that we've kind of taken some of the chips, so to speak. Not all of them, but a lot of our chips. We push to the middle, and so I think whoever that we get drafted, who we have a chance to draft, is going to be given an opportunity in training camp. If they make the team, it has to be somebody that we think that can help us towards the goal of winning a championship.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.